Hello everyone and welcome along to a bit of an impromptu episode of the TII podcast as I'm joined by Ross Chalmers and Tommy McIntyre on what is a Thursday evening, and not a very joyful Thursday evening, I think it's fair to say, either after the last 4 or 5 days for Rangers. Ross, how are you doing?
As you can probably imagine, Craig, not in the best of moods. It's been a tough week to be a Rangers fan. I think we can all agree with that one. So yeah, just try to get through at the moment. I think I'm trying to be positive because it's a different competition this weekend, but really just the way things have went the last couple of days, it's difficult to look by it. But I'm sure we're going to get stuck into all that this evening. I can't wait for that.
Absolutely. We'll start the podcast off on a bright note with Aldo RFC's comment, "Hello darkness, my old friend, there's no hope." So that's set the tone nicely for this one. We're also joined by Tommy McIntyre. How you doing, Tommy?
Yeah, I'm really well, thank you. I think you're right. An impromptu podcast, less of the surprise party feel of it, and more of that looks serious, you should probably go to the doctors. That type of impromptu kind of feeling to it. Yeah, listen, lots to get through. Not a great moment for the club, not a great moment for the support.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we'll just get stuck into plenty of talking points flying about on social media today, plenty of talking points amongst all Rangers supporting mates and stuff like that. I think they're all bereft, is probably quite a good word, as to how the performances have dropped off in recent weeks. So we'll probably start there. Ross, looking back at Ross County away, first of all, and Dundee away last night, how much of a surprise has this been, the level of drop-off? It felt like we were absolutely flying, basically until the Motherwell game at home. I felt like we were absolutely flying. We were going to beat everyone and anyone in our path. Philippe Clement had the full team working so well. You look back at that Ross County game at Ibrox when we had 40 shots or whatever it was on goal. We only scored 2 of them, which may point to one of our major problems, but we had that many shots at goal. We were so creative. We were so, I guess, unpredictable at times as well. And we just seemed to have completely reverted back to how we were under Michael Beale. And it came as a surprise to me. It seems to come as a surprise to quite a lot of people.
Yeah, I mean, I was definitely surprised by the performance in Dingwall. I felt that was a game for Rangers to go off the back of the Old Firm result, which is maybe not the perfect result, but they managed to do well to get a draw in the end of the day. I know that there was disruption through the week and things like that with the Dundee game being postponed, but I was really surprised by that performance. That was absolutely shocking. I mean, Ross County deserved to win by more, to be honest with you. I mean, I hate saying that, but they did. They absolutely battered us at the weekend. Last night, I don't think I was surprised, actually, by the performance, and that probably shows you where my mindset is at the moment in terms of the last couple of results. I just felt last night, I mean, I think after 2 or 3 minutes, you knew that Rangers weren't at it. I thought you could see quickly there wasn't a lot of confidence. I would actually go as far as saying they looked terrified. They really did. There was at one moment where the ball went down our right-hand side and Conor Goldson goes across and it just like gets caught under his feet and everything. And then he plays it to Tav and Tav can't get it out of his feet. And I'm just, the two of our most important players here, and they just look completely gone. Mentally, they're gone. So overall, once you see that in the first couple of minutes last night, yeah, I maybe wasn't surprised by the overall performance. Maybe I should be, because with the level of player that we have, we should be going to these grounds and we should be picking up maximum points. But we've just lost what I think Clement brought to the side, and was a really positive mentality, and the ability to fight until the end, really, in every single game. And we just don't really have that. I'm sure we're going to come on to it later on in the podcast regarding kind of Dujon Sterling's comments, but that's kind of how the team are playing, isn't it? It does look a lot like they're playing dead rubber games. And that's really disappointing considering where we are in the season. That we are there in a title race. Technically, we're still within a title race. I know most of the fans believe it's probably gone at this stage, but just to see the team come out and perform to that level when there's so much on the line is so disappointing. And I don't think the players and the club now can be surprised by the reaction of the fans at this stage. It's embarrassing, really. It's embarrassing. You've got to do better when these situations come along, and they haven't.
Yeah, it's an interesting point you make there. today, I guess reaction has been what reaction has been. There's been outcry about everyone, the scatterguns out. We're only 3 points behind at the top of the league, but it definitely does not feel that way. 3 points behind with 5 games left and a game against Celtic. I think we've still got a chance here, but it absolutely does not feel that way. And the performance last night against Dundee and against Ross County just shows you how much that has impacted people and how much it's impacted the fans, who I think were largely fully behind Philippe Clement, had bought into everything he was doing, and the last few weeks has just have just put a massive dent in that one. Tommy, I'm going to come to you with a really specific and really narrow question here. Where does it all went wrong?
Brilliant. So your connection's breaking up there, but yeah, listen. And so the short version of that is context is really important as well. So you have to subdivide the critique and what people are feeling really quickly. So we know the start of the season, the wheels sort of look like they're coming off. Philippe Clement comes in. I'm doing a very quick version of this, but Philippe Clement comes in, uplifts the squad to more than we expected, and gets a better tune out of them. Now, if people would have said at the point in time where Philippe Clement first comes in the door, by the way, you'll get to the 18th of April, you'll be 3 points behind Celtic, but needing to go to Parkhead as well, or the opportunity to go to Parkhead and beat them. You'll have won the first cup of the season, you'll have gotten out your group stage in the Europa League, and you'll be in the semi-final of the Scottish Cup. People, by and large, I think, would have taken your hand off for that, right? And it's absolutely fine to put that in its context and say, Philippe Clement and the team have been on a decent journey there. Where it really falls down is once you get yourself back in a title race, you're in a title race. So that once you get yourself back in bit drops off. And so we got ourselves not just into a title race, but got ourselves into pole position, essentially, with the chance to kind of cement it against Celtic at Ibrox, and then put in a shameful first 45. Managed to repair some of the damage by getting the draw in the last minute, so to speak, as well. And then you go, okay, right, we've come through that. That's always a difficult tie at Celtic. They're a really good side, etc. And then it comes to another part of the context, which is, and why people are feeling particularly aggrieved and particularly angry, is this team have then faced up to say, it's fine, keep the pressure on Celtic by beating Ross County and Dundee. 6 points that should be gimmies, right? None of this, the pitch, there was a bit of back and forward. It's upset the disruption or whatever of preparation, right? That's all nonsense. Dundee and Ross County should have been absolutely beaten. What gets people really angry is this team have stepped onto the pitch against Ross County and completely folded, conceded 3 goals, and never looked like winning it. I'm with Ross. Ross County could easily have scored a couple more. Actually, I thought Ross County were really good on the day as well. Kudos to them. And then be given another chance against Dundee to say, right, go and make another statement. No, the statement is we don't know what the statement's supposed to be. Here's a 0-0 draw. It never really looked like we were that dangerous either, to be brutally honest. That's what gets people particularly angry. It's the fact that you dragged yourself up to being in pole position, and then once that became really clear, and you had there's never a gimme in football, but 2 games where you should be taking points, you absolutely folded and handed the initiative away. And now it's a case of, yeah, maybe we're still in this, but it's going to be really difficult. That should not have been the case post those 2 games. That's where it's went wrong.
It's hard to disagree with any of that, really. And when you were doing your big picture piece around where we were in end of September, start of October, would we have bitten your hand off to be here? Absolutely, would have been. But the feeling and the performances in the last 2 games have just taken the wind out of everyone's sails. I think it's fair to say Philippe Clement's comments after the game last night at Dens Park have caught a lot of people's attention. Some people are saying it's a disgrace. Why is he coming out and defending the players? He's just talking as though he's watched a completely different game to the one that the rest of us have watched. And then there's another side of it where people are saying, oh, it's clearly obvious what he's doing. He's not going to jump on the back of these players who are going into a big cup semi-final on Sunday at Hampden against Hearts. He's not going to jump over the back of them, criticise them, and then expect them to go out and perform. Where did you land on that? What did you think of his comments?
Yeah, I mean, I think when I first read them, I was a bit surprised because the way Clement has been with the media, he has been pretty honest most of the time. And I think last night he wasn't. I think he was protecting the players. That's exactly what he was doing. I understand it from his point of view, and I can totally see where the fans are coming from in this as well, because I think he's looking at it from his experience as a Rangers manager. Okay, he's only been with these players for 6 months. Like you said, he's got a really important game at the weekend. He's looking at it like, how do I get the best out of these guys going into this last, 5-6 games, including the Scottish Cup, whatever, right? So I get it from his point of view. But the fans are obviously looking at it and going, why do these players deserve that level of protection? Because we are looking at it in these players in terms of the last 2, 3, 4 years. We're not looking at it in the last couple of games. We're looking at it like these players have been through quite a lot of bad runs with Rangers. A lot of highs as well, of course, but there's probably been too many lows for the support to take now. And I think that's where the divide comes. I do think overall the fans will let this go, right? I think the vast majority of the support still believe that Philippe Clement is the right man for the job. He's definitely the right man for the job in my eyes in terms of long term. You've seen that, the way he's been able to rejuvenate this side. I just think last night that the way he's probably looked at it is, I'll use a wee bit of my credit with the support here to try and protect the players. That's really all I can do in this situation. And like I touched on in my previous answer with Sterling, we'll come on to that later. He obviously had a different view, and that's coming from the player side, which is refreshing to hear. So I think just that's just the way it is. He's just trying to protect his players. I know it frustrates the fans when they hear that, because you're raw, you're emotional. You want to hear your manager come out and maybe be passionate and say, it's not good enough for Rangers. This is not what you expect. He'll know that. Philippe Clement will know that. He's not stupid, and I'm sure he'll have said something different in the dressing room at Dens Park last night. Like, I never try and get too caught up in what's said in the media, to be honest with you. They're all media trained. They're all told to say certain things at certain times, and that's just the way it is. I just want to jump back on something before I move on. You spoke there to Tommy about where it went wrong, and I think it went wrong for Rangers with that Old Firm result. Psychologically, that's where it's went wrong. And Tommy might be able to back me up on this one. I was not happy at the end of that Old Firm result. I was deflated, I think the word I used, Tommy, wasn't it? I'm sure. And I think it's because
you were very much downbeat. Yeah, absolutely.
And they were Tommy and Kyle were trying to kind of convince maybe he's a bit strong, but they were trying to talk me around and say, you get a last minute equaliser. There's got to be positivity in there. You've got to look forward these next couple of games, and you can go back top of the league, stretch your league, and you're back into the split. I think I always had this in my mind with this Rangers squad, that they needed that buffer, because I always think when there's that little bit of pressure on them, or maybe not a little bit, a lot of pressure on them, they just don't respond to it. And I just felt if they could give themselves that gap between Celtic, it would have lifted the pressure a little bit, because they look at each game and go, let's just go out and play. Let's go and do what we've been doing. Let's try and get the result. If it doesn't go the way we want, then we've got that buffer. We're still going to be top of the league. It's still in our hands. And I just think the evidence is there. I think the squad have felt that Old Firm was a must-win. I really do. That's just the way it looks to me. And they just look completely deflated since. And I think that's the way it looks last night. Do this squad really believe, maybe now it's a different question, I suppose, but before those two games, did they really believe they could win the title? I'm not sure. I'm really not sure based on the last two performances we've seen.
I think that's what the fans, I guess, are always looking at. You're never quite sure with this Rangers team which one's going to turn up, especially in the pressure games. So we get to semi-finals and then we turn up at Hampden. We're like, oh, I'm not sure what way this is going to go. We don't tend to play well at Hampden. We don't tend to get results. The Aberdeen League Cup final, for example, just for Christmas, I don't know many Rangers fans went into that confident we were definitely going to win that one. So I think there's a general lack of confidence in the team. But I think it's like you say, Ross, I think it's been bred over 3, 4, 5 years. It's not this team
and
aspect.
But that's a really important point as well. So, and don't get me wrong, right? Nobody's immune from criticism. Philippe Clement still absolutely the right man for the job. But he's also dealing with a squad, and let's say this doesn't get anybody out of anything, but a squad that's not his own. So his job right now is to just keep maximising the message and maximising what he can get out of players between now and the end of the season, whether that's to keep us in the title race or whether that's to just pick up a cup double or whatever, right? Before he knows he's going to make changes. He said when he first came in, he was looking for winners, etc. in the dressing room. He'll have learned tons over the last couple of days as well. He probably learned something about squad rotation and not tinkering too much as well for himself. But ultimately, a lot of this squad won't be there. Now, that's not a get out. That doesn't change the parameters of the fact that it's incredibly disappointing to have been in one position and then swiftly, after two what should have been relatively simple games, find yourself in the absolute polar opposite. But Philippe Clement's job is to nursemaid, right, this through. And the reason I say that, Greg, is to your point. We've seen this 5 years, whatever. A lot of these players are been there that a length of time and not being able to consistently deliver. Now, somebody could make lots of arguments why that is coming out of X, Y, and Z, but ultimately some players just aren't able to carry themselves forward. I think Philippe Clement will get more time than any other manager since Steven Gerrard in terms of backing as well, to be able to say, right, Michael Beale aside, but to be able to say, right, I intend to clear this out and then we go again. The problem is, at a more kind of higher macro level, because of the way that we've imploded, if we don't win the title, we also hand away the automatic entry to the Champions League group stages and the money that comes with that. But Philippe Clement's job right now is to keep the wheels on. That's it. Sometimes in management, you find that. You find you want to crack that team open. There's definitely parts of it that you don't want to carry on with. There's personnel that you want because they're causing problems for everybody else. But you've got to keep the wheels on until you get to the point where you can change it. You can't put down the burden until that point. And that's where Rangers find themselves. They cannot put down the burden. There's only so many players. Philippe Clement keeps having to go back to the well of the same players and asking for a performance. And that means nursemaiding egos a little bit and protecting them. It's exactly what he was doing. And so we should strap ourselves in for some of that, because he's not able to make wholesale changes game to game with the squad that he currently has.
Yeah, I'm going to pick up on, I guess, some of the points that have been brought in terms of us as fans experiencing this for the last 4 or 5 years. Robert Binney says Clement saying the right thing to protect the players. The discussion earlier, Aldo RFC saying Clement, right man, wrong players. And then I want to pick up on this point from Stephen Fay. Tommy says, why are we surprised the team have been doing this for 4 years now? I expected this team will not learn. What I want to pick up on that, and it was a bit of a discussion Ross and I were having just before we came on here. This is thrown around a lot in terms of this team's been doing this for years, blah, blah, blah. When you look at the team that generally starts, or at least plays most of the time, it's clearly people are just aiming this at James Tavernier, Connor Goldson, and potentially John Lundstram. If you look at that team last night, Jack Butland signed in the summer, Dujon Sterling, less than 2 years, John Suter, less than 2 years, then you've got Goldson and Tav, and then you've got Lundstram, who's been here 3 years now, I think. Lawrence been out injured a lot. Cantwell been here a year and a half. And then you've got Silva, Sima, and if you look at Dessers when he came on, all players that arrived this summer. This isn't a team that's full of players that have. It's not full of players that have been round this before, or have been culpable for failures in the past. This is a team that is largely fresh, or largely unscarred by seasons gone by. So it's quite obvious that these claims are being focused on the likes of James Tavernier, Connor Goldson specifically. Whether John Lundstram's in there, I don't know. I thought he's played well for the vast majority of this season. But what are your thoughts on that?
I think you're right in terms of when people say there's a mentality problem, they do focus in on a certain selection of players, those senior players, if you like, the core group, your leaders, in inverted commas, right, for whatever that word's supposed to mean for anybody. And it does come back to James Tavernier, Connor Goldson, etc. Again, I mean, the theme of the podcast for me is context, right? By no way, shape or form am I defending everybody. But you could look at the players they were playing with, the fact that they have picked up one title, the fact there's a couple of cups in there. Nobody's saying that they shouldn't have won more. I am absolutely saying they should have won more, right? But also been up against a historically good kind of Celtic pattern as well. We shouldn't forget the fact that Celtic have had a really good side and have won things because they've been a good side as well. Ultimately, as well, though, if we come back to the most important thing in this podcast, which is Rangers, you could take some of that leadership stuff and play it into mentality and the fact that they've seen and overseen, more failures than not. That's absolutely true. Then you could start to say, okay, but what do you define by success? So success, by and large, is winning the title. because that's where you need to start. But there's some other silverware and there's some really good European runs in there. And then you play in the fact that over the recent period, recent 5 years or whatever, you could probably run through Philippe Clement, Steven Gerrard, maybe Steven Gerrard out of it, but Michael Beale, Giovanni Van Bronckhorst. Could you really identify an absolute identity and style of play that we've had that hasn't just been get it out wide to Borna or Tav and throw it into the box and see if something happens? Now, I'm sure there's variations of that, but by and large, we never seem to have cycled and settled on a team that says, right, this is the way that we're going to mix it up, this is the way we're going to play. I think we had some elements of that this season, but then you get some big injuries as well. Now, I'm not saying the injuries have led to the collapse against Dundee or Ross County, but they do affect the style of play and the people you can put on the pitch. Back to the point in hand, though, which is people are right to question if it's time to clear out people who have become your senior leaders, because you can't have both elements. You can't say the dressing room drives the standards, much like any other organisation, top down or whatever, but then say, yeah, but it's not the senior leader, the senior players' faults. If you take James Tavernier for specifically, though, what do people want? There's a right back that pops up in really big moments and scores goals, occasionally lets you down at the back, but has always went to the well and has physically been an absolute, godsend for us because he's very rarely injured. I can't even remember a long term that he's been out for more than a game or two. So what does leadership mean? Does it mean that turning up every day, coming back from the defeats, driving your team forward, being part of a title-winning team, being part of a team that went to a European final, scoring goals, setting records for appearances, that type of thing? Or does it mean shouting on the pitch or whatever? So when people, I'll get to the end here, when people are saying that, they're looking at the leadership and the stronger players in the core, but they also have to look at the people letting them down, everybody as well. Thanks, Robert. Really appreciate that. I'm murder, but I'm doing my very best here.
No, I don't think he's saying you're murder, Tommy. I think he's saying James Tavernier's murder.
No, I think he was saying, I'm definitely saying Robert. Robert's in the comments before. He's definitely saying I'm murder. Robert, I'm coming for you as well. But no, I think it's just a case of what do you want? Leadership on the pitch and performance on the pitch could be two separate things. People tend to get it all wrapped up into one. And that's sometimes the problem with sitting on the outside of it as well.
Yeah, Ross, I want to bring up this comment from David P. He says, Tav, Goldson and Lundstram are the core leadership group and are serial losers. Tav and Goldson particularly the worst defenders. What do you stand on this? And I guess I don't want to call it a blame culture because it's but it seems to be those are the ones that people jump on whenever anything goes wrong. Oh, we can't hear Ross.
That's fine. Robert and Aldo have given me clear sight in the comments that I should come back into the conversation. There we go.
That's what that was. Yeah, apologies. Sorry, had some audio issues there. This is a difficult one for me because I've always been someone that's defended James Tavernier and Conor Goldson through the years, especially James Tavernier, because I think a lot of the Rangers teams that he's been involved in have been really poor, to be honest with you, and he's always been the standout player. That doesn't take away exactly what Tommy said, that when you've got to the kind of latter years of his Rangers career, he should have won more. Absolutely. But I feel sometimes you can only do so much as an individual. What I will agree with now is with the support is it's very, very difficult to actually argue against now that, especially Tavernier and Goldson, with how long they've been here, that they do have a bit of a habit for losing in the big moments. I think they've both been really good players for Rangers individually. I know that'll maybe annoy some people, but I really do. I think James Tavernier's statistics back that up. I don't really think I need to go into it. Conor Goldson's been our best centre-back since he's been here, to be honest with you. I don't think anyone's got close to him. John Souttar this season has performed really well, but I still don't think John Souttar's hit a level that we've seen with Conor Goldson throughout the years. So I think both have been really good for us individually. I just think maybe now there's just too much scar tissue. And I think I'm not convinced James Tavernier will move on this summer, but I think Conor Goldson could be one that maybe departs from Rangers in the summer and maybe he just looks for something new. John Lundstram.
Do you think that? Do you think, because it seems to be the other way around, the rumours are suggesting that potentially James Tavernier is the one that's going to depart?
Well, it depends on the interest, doesn't it? Depends on the interest. I think Conor Goldson, from his point of view, would seek a move right? That's the kind of the way I'm looking at it. I'm not sure James Tavernier would, but if I think I said this in the podcast a couple of weeks ago, if a Saudi club come calling for James Tavernier, he will go. There's no doubt about it. You know, he's at that stage of his career. It's life-changing money. I don't think you can hold that against him. He will move on.
Not just that, though, Ross. I mean, you're spot on, but not just that. Philippe Clement is looking at these players as well and going, if I can get money in the door to reshape it.
Yeah, exactly.
James Tavernier, to your point as well, which I absolutely agree with, no matter what you think of James Tavernier and Connor Goldson, they're not, at their ages, they're no longer the long-term answer for Rangers. And so it's all about succession planning. And right now, if you look at it, particularly in the right-back area, what's your succession plan? What do you do with that? And that's where it comes back to, again, contingency in the pre-season or when we get to the end of the season, where do you spend your amount of money? And there's not going to be a huge amount unless something dramatic happens behind the scenes. Yeah, you're going to have to select. So people might very well be unhappy that some of the players we're talking about are still on board come next season, because you can't do a Graham Souness and rip up the entire squad and say, I'm keeping like 3 people or whatever it was, right? You just don't get to that point. And so we're going to have to live with some of it. The question is, what do you do? Do you keep some of these big numbers that Ross is talking about, or do you cash in on them if you can?
Can I just come back just in terms of, and I agree with everything that Tommy said there. I think the difference this time compared to others with Tavernier, Goldson and Lundstram is, I think there's been times in the past where Rangers as a club have struggled, right? And lost games that they shouldn't have. But I've felt that those individuals haven't actually been that bad throughout the games. Like, there's been plenty of times where James Tavernier has played pretty well for Rangers and we haven't got the result. Same with Connor Goldson. And I think now the difference is, through the bad moments here, the bad form, they are probably the 3 worst players, I think, at the moment. I mean, Tavernier cannot find a pass. He can't, 5 yards, he can't find a man. Connor Goldson looks completely short of all his confidence. He doesn't look like he's comfortable in any 1v1 situations. He's losing a lot in the air that he never used to. It's one thing I always felt with Connor Goldson. It was very difficult to beat him in there. He's losing a lot of them. And John Lundstram, for me, he's probably the most frustrating one for me, because, and this comes back to, we'll maybe go on to the manager in terms of maybe what he's done wrong. But that game at Ross County at the weekend, right? You are losing the midfield battle. It's clear for everyone to see you're losing it. Right? Every time Ross County break up, win the ball in transition, they're away, they're cutting through as it will, right? And that's why they created so many chances. That's where they get their goals from. Now, at half-time, Clement should change it, right? If that goes to a 3 in midfield, I don't know. He has to change it somewhere or another. But what I want from John Lundstram in that situation, as being the kind of number 1 midfielder, the guy that's supposed to organise in there, I want him to grab Kieran Dowell. I want him to tell Kieran Dowell, we don't move for the next 10 minutes, all right? Me and you're going to sit behind the ball. Okay, we're going to get a bit of control of this game. I didn't see any of that. And then see him, even when he's in possession, he's not doing anything. He's not contributing enough to the game. He's not being progressive enough. I think when Clement first came in with Lundstram, how much he changed his kind of passing range. He had a couple last night, right? But I don't see it enough from him. I just don't think he's doing enough to get control of that midfield. And I think that is the big difference at the moment with those 3 players. I don't think they're playing well. Whereas other times I think they've been fine and Rangers haven't performed well, and maybe the criticism has a bit harsh. But I think at the moment they're all performing way below the level, and I think they all know it as well. I think they all know they're way off it, and that's why they probably don't look like they're responding on the pitch. And they're not. There's just nothing. I don't get anything from them at the moment.
Conscious of the agenda, Craig, and I know you want to move us on.
It's all right, fire away.
Yeah, I'm not going to. Don't disagree with anything that Ross has said there. Maybe the nuance I'd put to it is, I think what's really driving people to the wall here and making them so frustrated is, those are players that got us into the title race, that got us into pole position. And then from we've seen this movie before perspective, it comes back to who we were playing. Those 6 points were against Ross County and Dundee, and all those players went off the boil there. And you go, hold on. I think this is one of those moments where it's become incredibly crystal clear, right? That it's not we were in with a chance, but then we came up against a really good Celtic side, or we were in Europe and we came up against a really good European side, or we were really unlucky and it just didn't fall our way, but we got the 3 points against Dundee and we've kept going. This was a moment for this squad with those players who did perform really badly in both games, to say, right, we keep the pressure on. And you couldn't have asked for 2 better games. You really couldn't have, right? And so therefore you get there's no space, there's no leeway whatsoever with the support to say, right, well, it was just bad luck or whatever, or 1 or 2 players off. This is a moment where everybody stepped back and went, you have absolutely dropped the ball when you had a perfect chance to carry this title conversation on, with Rangers being the first name mentioned. And now it's, can Rangers catch? It shouldn't have been naturally that way, because those were 6 points should have been banked by us. And that comes back to the, right, well, I see Bluebell saying rotten since mid-Jan. Maybe not. I'm maybe not quite there. I think his performances have dipped. But I think intrinsically, from a senior players delivering Bluebell's perspective, this was senior players to drag the team forward at this moment. And those 6 points are what will haunt some of those senior players, and what people will remember as well to a certain degree when they think about this particular season.
Yeah, Ross, we're looking at Tavernier, Goldson and Lundstram, who obviously are a key part of the spine of our team, but are also kind of, apart from maybe Tavernier, focused on the defensive side of the game. How does that fit in with, I guess, a team that, apart from last night at Dens Park, apart from that trip to Dundee, have been creating lots of chances but not taking them in the final third? How does that criticism focus on the defensive side of the game, when actually up front we've almost, I would almost suggest, we've been worse up front than we have been defensively?
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think this was something I said after the Ross County defeat, that I know I keep harping on about this. You can probably tell it's still annoying me with that midfield at Ross County. But any defence will struggle if there's nothing in front of them, right? If a team can cut through you, well, your back four are going to be under a lot of pressure, and they're probably going to give up a lot of goals. And I think that's what we've seen. So I think I'm struggling here, to be honest. Yeah, I'm trying to compare the two, right? Because yeah, the defence have been really poor, but I think you're right. I think going forward, especially last night, we had nothing. Like nothing. I think the two SEMA chances in the first half are really all we had. We weren't really able to create anything. I know Dessers has that shot from the edge of the box in the second half, but it's never going in. It's a comfortable save for the goalkeeper. We've not had enough creativity up front at all. And I think, like, a good football team's all the same. You need kind of all parts to work, right? So if you are defending poorly, your attack's not going to be as potent. I suppose that's the way it all links up. But I think you're right, and I think it comes back to, again, a lot of the chances that we've missed. You got to look at Cyril Dessers at the moment, and I know you can't put it on him last night, I suppose, but Ross County, Fabio Silva's on the left hand side. He cuts in, creates a chance really, really well. You're at 1-0. Dessers puts that away. We are having a completely different conversation, I think, right now. I would imagine Rangers take that on and they go and beat Dundee last night. Like that is how small the margins are in football. And I think you're right to bring that up. I think that is where we're struggling probably more at the moment. So maybe I'm avoiding the question a little bit, but there was something I wanted to bring up in terms of Clement, and I'm interested to see what you both think in this, maybe the comments as well. What I find a bit strange at the moment with the selection is that he's kind of went away from what he'd done originally with the squad, where he kind of simplified things and he kind of put people in place where they suited most. And I get, look, there's been some injuries. I understand maybe squad depth isn't as best at the moment, but there's just a lot of strange selections and substitutions at the moment. I mean, Sima, okay, I've said before I'd like to see him on the right-hand side, but he's not really played well, so why don't we move him back to the left? That's where he was really good. For me, Silva's not a left-hand sided player. I think we've seen that. Let's move him back up front, right? There's Tom Lawrence, never a midfielder that plays in a two. Never. He's just not got it. Sterling, I understand what we have with Barisic at the moment. He's not a left-back. It's just, I've seen that all over the park at the moment. I think that's why we don't have any rhythm, because people are playing out of position constantly. And I just want to see us go back and simplify the approach again. I think you might actually get a wee bit more out of the squad. Play Ross McCausland in front of Tavernier. Individually wasn't great, but he helped Tavernier. Play Sima back on the left-hand side. He can stretch the left-hand side. And then there was one last night. He took Todd Cantwell off, who was playing number 10. I thought probably wasn't as... He was better at Ross County. He wasn't great last night, Todd Cantwell. But he's then brought Kieran Dowell on, And the weekend before he played Kieran Dale on the 2, they brought him on at number 10 last night. It seems like there's a little bit of, I wouldn't say panic's the right word, but I don't know what's really going on with the manager at the moment in terms of those selections. And like I said, this all is caveated with, he's definitely the right man for the job, by the way, long term. I don't want anyone to think I'm questioning the manager in terms of his position. I just think he's maybe got a few things wrong that haven't really helped as well. I think we can all say that the selections the last 3 games, I mean, think of the Old Firm selection. I think everyone was like, not really sure of this one. So I just wanted to bring that up. I'm curious what you both think in that one as well, because I do think Clement has got a few things wrong at the moment with selection. I think he's went away from the approach that was bringing success.
I think so. I think his hand's been forced a little bit by injuries. I think he has also been consistently bringing up the fact that he needs to manage players' game time. He seems to be trying to manage it a lot more than any of our previous managers have tried to manage game time. Now, I don't know if that's right. I don't know if that's wrong. He seems to stick pretty rigidly to what he's told by, I assume, the medical team as to how long players can play for. He doesn't seem to deviate from that very much, and I think that's why you see certain moments where players are brought off at 55, 60 minutes, and you're like, well, the game situation doesn't really dictate that they should be coming off, but they're coming off. So I think that's it's one I'm not fully bought into now. I know nothing about sports science. I know nothing about how long people should play and when they're returning from injury, etc., how much they need to build up their load, etc. But just as a football fan and having watched football for 30 odd years, then it's something that seems a bit strange to me in terms of he's almost valuing player. This seems a strange way to say it. He's almost valuing player health over the good of the team, and I don't know. There's obviously a balance to be struck there. As to
whether at any cost for you, Craig, doesn't matter about
the
players.
I was going to say, God Almighty, never been a reporting line with Craig. You'll be,
but no, I think
at all costs.
I think there's definitely something in there where like Sima's been back training for 3 weeks and yet he's still coming off at 60 minutes. So it's kind of like, well, he could probably push through to the 90, and situations like that are a bit not, I'm going to say the word confusing, but it's not quite the right word. Tommy, where do you stand on firstly the win at all costs mentality, and then the actual reasonable opinion?
Yeah, I feel sorry for anybody who works with you, to be honest with you. But no, listen, it should be win at all costs. Sometimes you need to go through the pain barrier to be a winner, right? And we all have those stories of just give me the injection, just do X, Y, Z, or whatever to get on the pitch and all that. Ultimately, though, there's a lot of games to play, and throughout the course of a season, particularly if you're being successful and you're in the latter stages of things, and Philippe Clement takes player welfare into account there. I don't think there's naturally anything wrong with that. I get your point, though, about at the moment the Rangers are in, with some key injuries, with players returning back, do you really want to get yourself into a place where you really need to show a reaction and you're starting Kmart Roof up front? That's not me picking on Kmart Roof, right? But was it the right time to play him for the first 45 minutes? That's a gamble by the manager, hoping that he gets something out of that and he rests Dessers and Dessers comes in and all that type of stuff. So I think it's right, but it can sometimes be overdone, and it's led to some decisions that are confusing and trying to put players into positions that don't naturally work, and the wheels have kind of become rickety. To the balancing of the squad, well, the squad is already unbalanced. We've known that throughout the season, and we did our best in January with no budget. And I think the manager's referenced there was no budget. We'll come back to that, I've no doubt, later in the pod. But to Ross's point, I think what we've seen clearly as well is outwith of some selected low-level games, Philippe Clement doesn't trust your Borna Barisic. So therefore he's got injury to Ridvan. He's not willing to put Barisic naturally in for some big games. He has to shuttle the team roundabout, and that leads to the displacement of other people who could be doing natural jobs. So what Philippe Clement here is doing repair work as we go, and it hasn't worked. It's a gamble. It hasn't paid off, and it hasn't paid off in the most spectacular style in the 2 games that should have been enough for him to have rested players to make those tweaks and then focus in on what was going to be, probably in his mind, the big things. Cup semi-final, Old Firm game, Parkhead. Those are the ones I need to concentrate on. Let me just get the squad through these 6 points. That'll keep us in a really healthy position. And then there we are. He's not legislating for people like, Diamandi's finger and, any other injuries. And that's not me having a go at Diamandi either. But he's tried a gamble. The gamble is not paid off because the level of performance for the people who have come into the jerseys and the level of performance for the core of the team that he's kept in their jerseys hasn't been there. And we've fallen at the first hurdles of the split. And now he needs to try and get them back on the horse for the Cup semi-final. But I think that's what led to it. He's obviously worked through the season and went, don't fancy you for the big games. Don't fancy you for the run-in. Let's see what I can do here. And it just naturally hasn't worked. But that comes back to the squad and the fact that, again, unfortunately, as Rangers fans, we are talking about another clear-out. There's only so many clear-outs you can have. They cost a lot of money. But we're there yet again.
Can I just say on the Diamandi thing, by the way, because I've seen this all over social media last week, right? It's highly likely that he has not been cleared to play. It won't be Mohamed Diamandi sitting going, I've got a sore thumb, I'm not playing. Like, it'll be the Rangers medical team that won't be clearing him to play. Why that is the case, I don't know. You would have to ask the club. But I think the criticism of Diamandi the last week's been ridiculous, to be honest. I mean, he's never came across as someone, he's been here for 3 or 4 months, never came across as someone that wouldn't want to play, he wouldn't want to give his all. He's looked really good in every single game he's played for us. So I think we just need to, I get where the frustrations are at the moment for the fans, but I think that's when you just, unfortunately, we're just going to have to be patient and wait for him to be clear to come back in. I get it.
I agree. Diamandi's finger is not the core problem at Ibrox at the moment. I think we can. There we go. That should be the title of the pod. It's not about Diamandi's finger.
Although Ridvan's injury has been a real problem, hasn't it? Really, when you actually focus in on that, like Ridvan, in terms of
one of the problems as well has been how the club have managed fans' expectations of when players are going to be back. I think consistently, Ryan Jack was supposed to be back in a week about 3 months ago, and even with the likes of Ridvan was days, not weeks, and yet we've still not seen him. The club's management of that expectation of fans, especially in a time where we've got so many players injured that you're just desperate for some of the first team players or the starters to get back, and the club's management of that has been really poor, and that's led to part of the frustration, I guess. I think.
Do you not feel for the club in that one, Craig, in terms of the injury information given out? Because I think it was Beale. He was quite public with injuries, and Clement's been a wee bit more public in terms of the timescale, right? Van Bronckhorst used to say nothing, used to give nothing away, and the fans were frustrated either way. I mean, the fans are frustrated now because the timescale isn't right, but they were raging if Van Bronckhorst didn't say anything. So I think it just comes down to, we just want our players back fit. And until we get the green light from the manager to say he's back fit, by the way, he's here this weekend, we're just going to be unhappy about it.
Exactly. The flip side of that as well is putting pressure on the player to force the return, because by and large players will want to get back to playing, most players, right? And if you say they're definitely going to be back by then, but they've still got a wee bit, they might try and force it or whatever. So he's just trying to shield the players as well. I'm with you. You can't really win either way. But back to the Ridvan point, forget the messaging of it. Ridvan being out has changed the setup of the team, because he doesn't trust Borna Barisic, or doesn't fancy him in that position, or Borna's head somewhere else because he's out of contract and he's probably going to go somewhere else. And so therefore you end up finding a shuttling of players across, which takes something out of your midfield, because you could have Sterling in there as the power kind of maker or whatever, to break it up. And that energy has definitely been lacking in the midfield too. And therefore you have to construct something different with the likes of Lawrence and asking him to cover ground that he's not set up for in any way, shape or form. I mean, you watched Tom Lawrence at the Celtic game. You know, him and Scott Wright trying to kind of work out spaces and where they were covering and all that. It just did not work. And then you see it into the last 2 games as well. So it has a domino effect all the way through the team, where you're just, right, where am I losing energy? And where am I losing a little bit of nous and a little bit of experience? And that's where you find you get picked apart sometimes, because people don't know naturally what their job is.
I think Pete Lawrence comes in here and says Ridvan a bit overhyped for me, as are a number of other players. I don't think Ridvan, while I think he was promising in what he was offering the team when he was in it, actually, as Tommy says, the structure that he offers the team and what he allows other players to go and do and where he allows other players to go and play is actually what's important about why Ridvan is needed.
It's the role. It's the role, not the individual. So it's how Ridvan plays, not necessarily Ridvan's quality, if that makes sense. You know, Ridvan is very different from Borna Barisic and actually looked very suited to playing how Philippe Clement wanted them to play in terms of the fullbacks coming inside and things and getting more involved. And we've lost that completely. I mean, Sterling, I think all of us love Dujon Sterling as a player, especially off the ball. I mean, he's fantastic, but he's very limited on that left-hand side. And that's not a criticism on, by the way. He's not a left-back, right? So I get that he's only been put in there. But you've seen it again last night, and Dundee were well aware that he just wanted to come inside all the time, and they were just showing him down the line. And unfortunately, if you're playing left-back and you don't really have the best of left foots once you get there, you're not really going to be able to do much. And I think that's what it came down to last night. I think teams are well aware that we are struggling in that area, and they're targeting it. And until we get Ridvan back, we're going to have to try and work out a better way to protect that area.
That's it. And I see some comments there, and you're right in terms of, Ridvan have been posted missing and lost goals. Right, there's not a defender in world football that you won't be able to look at and go, oh, they lost a goal. Right, it's kind of in the job description that you're going to have to be culpable at some point. Back to your point, and back to the wider point is, it's nice to have a left back playing their actual position, right? And that's not a criticism to John Sterling. But also, specifically for me, Ridvan is a much better ball carrier. Whether it's on the outside or the inside, he can carry it. Borna Barisic doesn't do that either. Barisic is faced up with somebody that's not in the final third. What he'll do is he'll play it inside or he'll go back the way. It's only in the final third round about the box. He'll take the step into the left as quickly as he can and he'll whip it. That's his game. And he's a very good crosser of the ball, right? Arguably the best crosser of the ball at the club. But he's not somebody who wants to carry the ball 40, 50 yards and then try and do something, which Ridvan's willing to do. And that moves you further up the pitch. It moves the pressure up the pitch. Whereas Borna Barisic, from a defensive perspective, invites the pressure, which is imbalanced with James Tavernier, because James Tavernier wants to push it forward as well. That's why it's as you say, it's not the person specific, it's the qualities that would be in that position that you're looking for.
Never thought I'd be on this podcast. Absolutely can't wait to see Ridvan Yilmaz come back, especially where we've been at certain points this season, but that's where we are, isn't it?
There you go. I think that's a very good synopsis of what the last couple of weeks have been. That's what it's driven us to.
I think I'm going to go kind of move us on a wee bit, but kind of go back to a previous discussion as well. We spoke about the fact that up front we've been misfiring for however long now. January was obviously a massive one where many of us, I think including many of us on this podcast, were shouting for Lauren Shankland to be signed. Philippe Clement came out. It was a really random place for him to reveal it, but it was a night with Graham Souness at the Armadillo or something like that, where he said that actually his budget in January was zero, which was really interesting. I guess some of us suspected that, but we also suspected because he's a new manager, surely he's going to get something. I think the fact that his budget was zero is that how concerning is that, or how impressed have you been with the change that he's been able to make up until now, albeit the last two games have been how they've been, and how big a mistake is it by the club not signing a striker? Ross, I'll let you take that one first.
Well, I mean, he's saying his budget's zero, but they did bring in players. They did recruit players in January. Fabio Silva, Oscar Cortez, and Mohamed Diamande. So, yeah, okay, maybe when he's referring to that, I think the thing has always been for Rangers in January was about Lauren Shankland. I actually thought we'd probably be done talking about Lauren Shankland, but here we are again talking about one on our podcast. I never believed that deal was going to happen, right? I never felt it was going to happen, because Hearts would want an absolute premium, and as they should, by the way, because if we were in that position, we would want the same. So never thought that was going to happen. I think the recruitment we done in January was good. I think we've been really unlucky with Cortez. Diamande looks a really, really good player. I'll probably get a lot of abuse for
Are you
this.
still going to bang the Silver drum?
I don't think Silver's been anywhere near as bad as people make out. And also, he's not playing in his position. I had this argument right at the beginning when we brought him in. Everyone's saying he's a left-sided player. He's a left-sided player. No, he's not. You've seen it in the last month. He's not a left-sided player. He can't play there. So I can't argue and say he's not played well, right? That's fine. I agree with that. I feel a bit sorry for him in terms of he's not played up front a lot. But anyway, I think overall, 2 out of the 3, I think you can say were good signings, injury unlucky. I think where the club have probably let the support down was I always felt they probably had to go and get a striker on loan. Felt that was the only way that was going to be possible. Again, that's then backed up from what Clement is saying at this event that he was at, saying they had no budget. I didn't think they would have a lot to spend. I feel the club could have been a wee bit more proactive there and brought a striker in on loan. Even just to give a little bit of support, because let's be honest, Cyril Dessers, he scored a good amount of goals for his first season as a Rangers player. Do I believe he should be the first choice striker for Rangers? Absolutely not. He's not good enough. But he has scored some important goals throughout the season. But seeing times like the moment where he's not performing, we don't really have anyone to come in. I mean, Kemar Roof comes in last night, but Kemar Roof's been so far off it every time we've seen him this year. I mean, Kemar Roof's body's let him down, unfortunately. He's just at the end of his end of his career, to be honest with you. So I think we needed someone in there to provide a bit of support. I understand the January market is very, very difficult, but I think the way we looked at January was, how do we give ourselves the best opportunity to go on and win this title? And I think a lot of the support felt when we came out of it, we hadn't done that. We were leaving it to chance. We were leaving it hoping that the guys we had brought in the summer and in January would be enough to fire us to the title. And unfortunately, it looks like it's not going to be enough. And I think it's a real big opportunity missed. There should have been a striker coming in January. Whatever that deal was, we should have had one at the door.
Tommy, do you agree? A huge opportunity missed, and it's had a major impact on our season by not signing a striker in January?
Well, I mean, all the budgetary conversation to one side, I think what Philippe Clement and his team tried to do was mix it up. So it's the right debate and absolutely right to ask those questions. I think, again, put it in its time, which is we had Sima scoring goals as well. You had Dessers, you were moving Lammers out, and that was a kind of known quantity. So he looked at it and he said, right, how can I mix it up? What I'll do is I'll bring in somebody in the midfield, because I absolutely needed that, and we did need that, and Diomande looks like a good player. And then I'll bring in Silva and Cortez. Cortez will score goals from wide as well, and he allows me to play Silva in a slightly different position, right? Because you'd be able to have that. Remembering as well that Danilo's goals have been taken out of the team already, right? So then you're looking at and you're going, right, what are you not set up for? You're not set up for a relatively long-term injury to Abdallah Sima, and then you're not set up for an injury to Cortez that takes him out for the entire season. So the reason I say that is, one, yeah, you could have went for the striker, and I think on balance probably should have, right? I don't naturally think that Silva's worked. That's not to say he's a bad player, and some of what Ross says about playing him in the wrong position is absolutely spot on, but I don't think his ability to unlock teams has really been at the forefront of his game, and we've not seen tons of goal contributions, whether that's assists or whatever, round about where he is. But yeah, they tried to mix it up from a bringing players in perspective, right? We can get some goals from Sima, some goals from Silva, some goals from Cortez, get Dessers in there, you know, McCausland can chip in, whatever that looks like. Let's get Lawrence and Cantwell and all that back too. That hasn't all come together. And like I said, you get those injuries that come in as well. So you're then left casting about going, okay, my main striker's not firing, and I don't have the goals from the rest of the forward line that I was relying on, which means you're back to relying on Cyril Dessers, who blows so hot and so cold that he is never going to be the long-term answer for Rangers. Can he do enough to fight us to the title was all I was ever saying. The question is, maybe not. And so that's where we find ourselves. So yeah, we could have went for the big striker signing or whatever. And remembering as well, you're always taking a gamble in January, because what you're essentially saying there is, I want to find a striker who could essentially take the jersey off Cyril Dessers and is going to bang the goals in, but is oddly available for transfer on a loan basis in January, so probably hasn't been playing for his parent club. So you're always taking a gamble with those types of things. ultimately, again, I go back to what Philippe Clement and his team tried to do was mix it up and be flexible. Goals from Silva, goals from Sima, goals from Cortez, goals from McCausland, goals from Dessers, Cantwell coming back with goals. Hopefully Lawrence can come in and chip in with a few. Oh my God, there's KMR Roof. Can he give us one or two as well? That whole picture just hasn't really worked. And so all of that needs to be taken into the story when you say, why didn't we just sign a striker in January? Because it's really not that simple.
To me, it is that simple. To me, you just go sign a striker, and that's what you do.
But you're out there working people to death. So I'm not really willing at this point in time to take you.
Tommy's been listening to the managers too much as well. He talks about the story.
Aye.
He's been listening to the club too much.
I'm not defending it. Don't me wrong, right? I'm not defending it. I'm just saying it's very simple to say, right, if you've got limited budget to no budget, right, you go and try and find a striker, right? Generally at the higher end of the wage brackets or whatever, right? That maybe takes away your ability to get Diomande in, to get Cortez in, right? To get Silva in because you went for one. And so he's tried to maximise getting new fresh bodies in that he's identified and into the squad to not just bring something on the pitch, but uplift behind the scenes as well, and maybe a better level of training or round the ground or whatever, and hopefully chip in with goals. So yeah, you could go back and forward on this podcast and every other one saying what was the right decision. Ultimately, they went with it, and I don't think anybody would say Diomande's a bad player, and I don't think anybody wasn't impressed by Cortez up to the moment of his injury and the fact that he looked like he could score goals. I think the one that people will come back to, unfairly or not, is Fabio Silva has not been involved in assists or goals as much as we would have liked. If there's one that trips people up, I think it's that one.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with that one. Right, we're fast approaching the hour, so let's finish on a nice easy question. Ross, I'll come to you first. 5 games to go in the league, 3 points behind. We're in a League Cup semi-final. A Scottish Cup semi-final this weekend against Hearts. Where do Rangers finish this season?
Oh God, what a question. I actually do think we'll respond this weekend. Maybe I shouldn't believe that at the moment with the performances, but I do think we will. Good experiences with Hampden this season. They've already won a trophy there. I think they'll be right up for that one, and I think we should have enough to beat Hearts. So I'm relatively confident about this weekend. In terms of the title race, I think it's done. I wish I could say something different. I wish I could give the rallying cry, but I just think we've put ourselves in a situation where we've got too much to do. And I think, unfortunately, don't like saying it, but I think the other side of the city have found a bit of form at the right time, and we haven't. And that's what wins you titles. That's it. They found their form, and I think it will be very, very difficult for us to bring it back. What I will say in that is, I really hope I'm wrong. I'll be the first person to come on this podcast and hold my hands up and say, I was incorrect. I got it completely wrong. Rangers proved me wrong. We went on and won all these trophies. That's fine. I'll happily accept that. I just got to be honest right now. I just think we've given ourselves way too much to do, and with only 5 games to go. And unfortunately, I don't think we'll have enough.
Yeah, Tommy, I think I land on the side of, I actually think we'll win the Scottish Cup, but we'll finish second in the league. Where do you see the rest of this season going?
It's hard to see past that. I think, again, yeah, I'm with Ross. I think our city rivals have found a good bit of form at this moment in time. I think the old firm at Ibrox, yeah, if we could have got the points there, maybe it would have given us a cushion. Going to Parkhead, always historically difficult. It's more in their hands than ours now. So yeah, I think if there's one to concentrate on, it's the game in front of us, which is keep ourselves in the cup and aim for another final. Very difficult for us to find our way back into getting our hands on the league trophy come the end of the season. Very difficult.
Yeah, I think the games that we've played the last 4 or 5 days, if you look at the goal difference, that's when you need to make up that gap as well, not only in points but in goals, and that's when you need to bridge that. And even if you managed it in one of the games and you faltered in the other one, you're still well in it. But I think that comes into it as well, because even if we do win at Parkhead now, we're still behind on goal difference. So
I should say though, it's not over.
It's absolutely not over. It's absolutely not over. But I just I think it's a step too far for us at the moment.
Well, that's it. I mean, when we win 40-0 on the last day of the season to overturn the goal difference, it's going to be mind blowing for Scottish football.
But,
yeah, I'm glad you guys made it in that positive because I wasn't feeling like doing that. So thanks very much. I appreciate that.
Aye, well, there you go. Aye, realistically, it's very difficult. There's no two ways around that. Telling ourselves anything different would be false, and there's no need for that.
It's fine. I'm looking forward to Mikel Arteta sorting away that stoppage time penalty in the last day of the season. So
you should look forward to the authorities chapping your door that you're working people to death. Is what you should be looking forward to.
It's fine. I don't have anyone work for me, so we're all good. I think we'll end the podcast on that really positive note. So thank you very much, everyone, for listening. If you enjoyed the podcast, please drop a like. Please do subscribe, whether that's on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, wherever you get your podcast. Please do subscribe. It does help us massively, and it also means you don't miss out on any upcoming TII content. We've got plenty more to come as we go forward. We'll have a post-match for the I keep going to call it the League Cup semi-final, the Scottish Cup semi-final against Hearts this weekend, and then we're into yet another week as we build up to the first games of the split, and hopefully we'll be in a Scottish Cup final by then. But thank you very much, everyone, for listening. Thank you very much to Tommy and Ross for joining us, and until next time, goodbye.